Hi, I'm Scott Humphrey, CEO of the World Floor Covering Association, and this is Leadership Live. Thank you for joining me again. In a previous talk with you, I discussed the believability and what causes someone to believe you. Dr. Albert Moravian at UCLA did some research and found out that 7% of your believability comes from the words you say, 38% comes from the way you say those words, and 55% comes from the action that follows it. So words, music, and dance. The words, the way you say the words, the way you express them, and the body language, the action that follows that. Even though the smallest component, words still matter. I'll never forget a story I heard when I was able to go out and hear Zig Ziglar when he was alive with us. He told the story of going to a prison ministry event where he took one of the Dallas Cowboys with him and went into a prison. And they were talking to the inmates and just kind of encouraging them and sharing their faith with them. And one of the inmates looked at the Dallas Cowboy and said, "Man, how did you get to be a professional football player? How did that happen?" And he said, "My dad always told me I was going to be a professional football player. When I was a little kid just playing rec ball, he would say, 'Son, you're going to be good. You're going to play in the NFL one day.' And he said, when I was in high school, he said, I had some setbacks, and he said, but I didn't get discouraged because my dad was always telling me, you're going to make it. You're going to be an NFL player." And he said, in college, he said, I really was able to excel. And he said, I kept hearing my dad's voice, "You're going to make it. You're going to play in the NFL one day." And he said, "You know what? I never thought about it." He said, "But I became exactly what my daddy said I would be." And he said, without hesitation, the inmate behind the bars said, "Yep, so did I." The old kid saying, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me," is not true. Words matter. And I've been in many meetings where weak leaders felt like they had to demoralize somebody in the meeting because maybe they came up with a more creative idea or they threw out a thought that might not have made sense, but the way it was handled by the leader was not good. Words matter, and words can either stimulate thought and creativity, or words, on the other hand, can cause somebody to quit, to give up, to walk away, or to believe that what is possible is not possible. You may know the name Ben Hooper. He tells a story about being a young kid growing up in rural Tennessee and being an illegitimate child, not knowing who his father was. And he said every community he went into, he felt like he was being talked about. He was the guy that everybody wanted to know, hey, who is his dad? Who is he? And he said he goes into a community and he's going to school there and he knows the kids are all talking about him. And the talk is that there's a new preacher at the church, and so he decides to go hear him. But he didn't want to go in the crowd because he didn't want to be the topic of conversation. So he sneaks in after the sermon starts, sits on the back row, and he said, man, he was really good. He said he was engaging. He talked to me. He said, I felt like he was talking just to me. And he said, and then at the end of the service, he would sneak out before anybody could get to him. He said that happened for several months, and he said, one day he got there a little bit late and he had to move up a few rows and he sat down and he said the pastor ended the sermon really abruptly and he said he wasn't able to get out. He got caught in the crowd of people who were leaving. And he said he's trying to sneak through so nobody would notice him, and he feels a hand on his shoulder. And he hears the words, "Young man, whose boy are you?" He said the conversation he didn't want to have, and he turns around and he looks, and it's that young pastor who had just moved into town. And he gets ready to say, "I don't know." And before he can, the young pastor says, "Oh, I know whose boy you are. You're a child of God. Now go out there and live up to your Father's calling." That young man was Ben Hooper. And Ben Hooper went on to become a 2-term governor of the state of Tennessee. And he talks about that event changing his life. Somebody saying words that said, "You matter, and I believe in you." Listen, just because you're a leader, don't think that your words don't matter. In fact, you should be more mindful of your words than anyone else because they're watching you, they're listening to you, and they care what you think. Encourage with your words. Don't discourage. And then go out there and lead.